Hello and welcome to the Comparesoft ERP Podcast. Today we're looking at ERP implementation failures, why 70 to 90% of implementations fail, and the critical success factors needed to avoid those failures. I'm joined by Jen Payne, co-founder of Bright Labs, with deep experience across manufacturing, engineering, and complex supply chain environments. Jen spent most of her time at Caterpillar, Siemens, and the military, where she helped design and operate large-scale logistics and inventory programs. During that time, she also completed a master's degree in logistics management, focusing her theses on ERP critical success factors. So in this episode, we're talking about fundamentals, where an ERP journey really begins, why data and process problems cannot be solved by software alone. And Jen identifies her two most valuable actions to ensure ERP implementation success. Hi Jen, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. The topic of conversation today, Jen, is ERP implementation. Before we get into analysing critical success factors, let's first understand the beginnings of the ERP implementation process. So you've recently co-founded Bright Labs. What did you see happening in the industry that made you feel a people-first business analysis practice was needed?
Well, firstly, Ryan, thanks very much for inviting me onto the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to be asked to be on this. In terms of why we set up Bright Labs, and as you say, a people-focused consultancy, is that the three of us worked together previously in a company called Volta Trucks, which was an electric truck startup, and a huge amount of challenges there in terms of building a company from scratch, implementing ERP systems and all the other systems that we need, CAD and PLM systems, et cetera, and integrating them all together. But what we found was we had such a great bunch of people. We were able to recruit some really good talent who wanted to be part of making a difference. But everybody still needs development, support, nurturing, whether you're straight out of uni or school or you're very experienced. Through our backgrounds, Bex and I, we spent a lot of time trying to develop our people and get a good team together. And we felt that that was a real differentiator, especially when things are going wrong. You can lean on those people because they've got the support network around them, and not just, the boss, the manager, but also their peers as well. We did a lot of peer review of each other's work and supporting each other. And we found that that's the best way to get a team together that can implement these systems, because it is really difficult. It takes a lot of effort. A lot of things go wrong. And without that support network within the teams, it becomes really disheartening. And that's why we're very much people focused, because if we get the best people performing to their best ability, then we'll hopefully overcome some of those massive challenges that we have with ERP implementations.
Yeah, and so do you often hear that an ERP journey starts long before choosing any sort of system, any consideration there? In your view, where does that journey actually begin?
Yeah, well, lots and lots of different reasons, and this is very unique to every organization. So you get internal factors and external factors, and the external factors can be things like your current systems, for whatever reason, aren't up to the job of what you need them to do. So, for example, if you've scaled up, so you started off as a smaller business, you've got maybe smaller software. So you might have a finance package, and you might have a logistics package, and you might have some other package, and you think, actually, we've scaled beyond this. And now we're seeing shadow IT and Excel spreadsheets creeping in to fill all the gaps that really an ERP can provide that backbone to your whole business. So that's one reason why people go through it. There's also regulatory compliance as well. If you are really scaling and you want to ultimately IPO, that you need to have a system that is fully SOX compliant, Sarbanes-Oxley or similar. So That's another reason. So these external pressures that come from a growing company, but also it's been the vendor that turns around and says, actually, we're not supporting this particular software any further beyond like 2028. And you go, okay, great. Well, we've now, our hand is forced. So people are forced into it one way or another. And some of the other reasons are just a general, I suppose, displeasure at the current system. And that's what, a lot of companies go, well, that's broken and that's broken. I know, we're just going to rip it all out and we're going to replace it with one system, which on the surface sounds like a great idea because integrations between systems are really complicated, difficult to do, and they take a lot of effort and can break as well. So you think, great, we'll just put everything in one system and we get rid of all of those integrations and it all moves seamlessly around. So all of the data problems, people see that those will be that they'll be solved overnight. You just put in this big ERP system and happy days, all your data problems and, double entry and things all goes away. So yeah, there's lots of different reasons why people want to do it. And as we see a lot, sometimes it's seen as the next shiny thing. It'll solve all our problems. Let's do this. But it comes at huge cost. And you also get it as somebody's pet project sometimes. They go, actually, this is a focus that I can really get my teeth into, and I can be seen as the person that has done this, amazing implementation, whoever it is within the business, and they are sometimes sold the shiny tool by some very slick salespeople that say your life will be better if you implement this.
If only it was that simple, eh?
Yeah, definitely.
If we take a hypothetical, so if, say, for example, a manufacturing MD who was considering an ERP system, if they came to you and confessed their entire operation is currently being held together by spreadsheets, what's the
Mhm.
very first thing you would recommend they do to regain control of their data and processes?
Well, the first thing I would recommend is I wouldn't recommend anything is to listen to what they are using those Excel spreadsheets for. So we have a process that we go through, and it starts off with listening, because all of those spreadsheets are doing something for a reason. People don't just create these sort of fillers for no reason. So listen to what their business is, what their current processes are. Have a look at those spreadsheets, how those spreadsheets are integrating in whatever way, even as a manual integration, it's still an integration with another system. And treat those spreadsheets as real requirements for the business, because you can't just implement an ERP system and go, oh, well, it does everything. If you just stick to the standard process and their standard offering within the ERP system, you don't need those spreadsheets anymore. But you might have missed something absolutely fundamental and unique to that business that they really need. So yeah, the recommendation would then fall out of the process of really listening to what the problem is and what their unique situation is.
And if you take a look at those spreadsheets and you see, missing fields, duplicate data, we often hear the phrase, garbage in, garbage out. Is it a case of saying, right, fix your data first before doing anything?
It it is necessary to fix the data first, yes. But I find it really important to understand what that piece of data is what the purpose is of it, what it's there to achieve. So it might be duplicated, never good, but what's that piece of data there for? And it's normally to inform a decision somewhere down the line. So you have to understand each of those data points and what they're there for, and who's using them ultimately. Um, if it's very messy data and incorrect, it's never a nice task, but you have to go through it and make sure that it's in some kind of format that is structured so that people can understand it. And it may be a case that actually some of that data is so corrupt that you're best off just leaving it behind. Something that people very often forget to budget both time and resource for, that data cleanup, because it can be a huge piece of work. And unfortunately, the best people to do it are the people that use that data on a day-to-day basis. If you get somebody in from external that doesn't understand that data and what it's there for, inevitably they don't make the situation much better, because they may change that data to something that then the organization doesn't understand anymore.
It's very high risk. They could be even
Mm.
getting rid of data that is essentially needed for a process.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned it already, misunderstanding the role of an ERP, it can lead to overhyped expectations. If a company's sold by this glossy package, this is going to fix everything. What are the most common misconceptions you see among CFOs, CEOs when they come to implement ERP?
I think, unfortunately, quite often it's been a long time since they were at the coalface putting data into a system, sitting next to um, the financial controller or the bookkeepers, and understanding, the data input and the decisions that the data are being made on, and they see a demo and they go, well, that looks really easy, because they haven't done that job for so long that they misunderstand that there's a lot of complexity to putting information into a system and using it on a day-to-day basis. And especially when you go through an ERP implementation and you see the the system implementers say, oh, well, it doesn't quite do that, we'll put in a workaround. And then there's workaround on top of workaround and a manual system and a bit here, and it doesn't quite flow. That friction for the individuals that are working on it can mount up. You hear the phrase technical debt. So the system ends up, this new shiny system has a lot of technical debt that then the C-suite don't fully understand how much effort that then takes. And I would really advise them to spend a day in the life of back again, before they even start an implementation. Just spend a day back at the coalface looking at what people do, and understanding how complex it really is.
Yeah. So at Brightlands, you use a framework called CARES, CARES. Can you talk
Yeah.
us through that framework and how you apply it in practice when you're working with a client?
Yeah. So it stands for critical thinking, adaptability, resilience, emotional intelligence, and systems thinking. So what we decided on that framework because those are the skills and the fundamentals that we think every business analyst will need and every system implementer will need. And it gives you that kind of rounded skill set and way of thinking as well that you need for, I think, work going forward, especially with AI coming in. What's the added value of us? So starting off with critical thinking, being able to look at a problem and understand that if you walk into a workshop, for example, and you say, okay, we'll map this process and we'll see where are the pain points, where are the issues, and naturally people will say, well, I think the answer is this. If you speak to one person and they'll be absolutely adamant with their view of the way things are going wrong or the way the process works, you speak to the next person and they'll be absolutely adamant the way they see it is correct and not the other person, and speak to the third, fourth person. None of them are wrong. They're all absolutely right. They have their own opinions and they have their own view of that part of the process. But the critical thinking part comes in to say, okay, well, we take all of those opinions and we drill down into the absolute, nub of the problem, the root cause, and in a way, we're not criticizing, but we're looking at the critical um, element of it without criticizing, to say, okay, this is the way you see it, but actually, could it be this? Could that person's bit of it also be correct? And understanding that we can pull that apart and analyze it in a logical way, and come to a joint understanding. So that's the critical thinking part of it. Um, and also then being able to be adaptable. So from that critical thinking, we can adapt to different ways, different opinions, and also new information coming to light. So that happens all the way through an implementation, is that things will change, new things come to light, new requirements drop in. Doesn't matter how well you do requirements mapping at the start of the of that exercise, things will pop up. People have forgotten things. People come up with great ideas halfway through and they go, yeah, let's put that in. Being adaptable all the time for when things change, because they always will. Resilience, I think that ties in very much with adaptability, because it can be quite disheartening when you spent so long working on one piece and then you go, actually, that doesn't work. Fundamentally, we've gone down the wrong path, and that can happen. We need to backtrack and understand and sort of go through the process of that post-mortem, in terms of analysing why things didn't work out, why we went down the wrong path potentially. And you might do that with an entire system. If ultimately you haven't implemented what you intended to, you have to be adaptable to come back and start again, and have that resilience to be able to deal with it. Emotional intelligence, I think that comes back very much to our ethos of listening first. So not diving straight in with a solution. We spend a lot of time just listening to what the needs of the business are, so that we can actually uncover the true requirements. And emotional intelligence, I found, it's a key skill. But one case that I always come back to is, I was doing a small system implementation, and went into a workshop, and you've got 5 or 6 people there, and there's one person in the corner, crossed arms, with the look on their face that said, I'm not interested.
I know
So
best.
yeah, and it's like, okay, and immediately having that emotional intelligence to kind of spot that person early on. And I spent, and it does take time, but I spent some time understanding that person's sort of point of view, and the biggest problem that they had, and why they had that attitude, is that nobody had asked their opinion, and they were probably one of 3 people that were using the original older system that we were looking at replacing. And the first thing that they said to me was, nobody's asked me. I don't even know what this meeting's about. The emotional intelligence to, like, kind of not get your back up, but sort of go, oh, right, okay. And be more inquisitive about, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that, you're not being listened to? And initially, so they were very much cold to the whole project. And it did take months to bring them round. And by the end of the project, that we rolled out the system, as I left, they gave me a big hug and said, thanks very much. Thanks for listening to me. And
Excellent.
they were absolutely pivotal to implementing that system. And they came up with loads of requirements that we would have otherwise missed. They were absolutely great in holding us to account, doing that critical thinking of, oh, it won't work like that because of this. But because I'd spent the time with them to bring them round, they were doing the critical thinking for us as well. Um, and saying, oh, you haven't thought about this, and holding us to account for the quality of the system we were implementing. So yeah, that's a reason why emotional intelligence is very important, to understand those factors, because it is all about the people. It's not actually about the software. The software, if we didn't have people problems, the software would probably be implemented a lot easier. But we're humans, and we have feelings and motivations, and so that's why we're pretty keen on that element. Um, and then the last one is systems thinking. So as people generally in business go through their careers, they'll be in finance, or they'll be in logistics, or they'll be in operations, or be in engineering. And some people are lucky to have worked in lots of different areas, but most people don't, and they stay in that kind of stovepipe. So the systems thinking part is where we come in, and I don't know if it's luck or judgment, but I've ended up working in lots of different fields, as have a lot of our people, so that we can look at the end-to-end process, that global process of the whole system. So finance is, good case in point. Understanding how the money moves through the ERP system is absolutely vital, and all of the different things that can affect the money all the way through, from the moment you design a part, and that part is going to have a cost, and how you ensure that that cost follows all the way through, and the different types of cost elements to that item, be it, a standard cost, a variable cost, shipping costs, and all the rest of it. You have to have that understanding of the total system, which, if you don't, and somebody says, oh, can we just change this thing here? This little bit, this little, one little data point that's over here, can we change that? You as the analyst or the implementer needs to understand the second, third, fourth, fifth effects of those, of that one little change all the way through the system. Because if you don't, that one thing might cost you, a week's work to unpick it all, or a huge data problem down the line. So that's why we ensure that our people are systems thinker as well, and try to always get them to think about the wider implementations, not just when somebody says, oh, can we add this field in, or can we change that? Yeah, it's like literally 30 seconds potentially in a system to change a field or a data point or something. What are the knock-on effects of those?
What's the impact? It could be huge further down the line.
Yeah.
Obviously, all 5 points of that CARES framework are incredibly important. Just from hearing what you've been saying, I would say possibly adaptability is the most important part of that. It has to be a dynamic process. It has to be it's forever changing. It has to be adaptable. When an ERP project starts to struggle, which part of the CARES framework tends to break down first, based on what you've seen? Would it be that adaptability side, if someone isn't adaptable to change or system management?
Yeah, I think that adaptability, I mean, people build contingency into their implementations, but nobody really wants to use it. And very often it gets used up very quickly, and then people shut down being the adaptable, because they go, well, we can't deviate out of the plan because the contingency's gone, be that time or money. So people then get stuck into delivering, what they plan to. Turns, maybe they started off in a very agile way with the implementation, but then you realize that you're almost forced down a waterfall process, where if you haven't designed a waterfall process or implementation from the start, you don't have the bedrock of stability to turn it into that later on. So I think you're right that adaptability quite often ebbs away as you get further uh, down the implementation, and even to the point, at the end of the project, you're a couple of weeks from go live. There's really no adaptability in there if you've got something fundamentally wrong, because the ship has sailed.
Yeah. So we mentioned at the beginning of this episode that you wrote a master's thesis on ERP critical success factors, and that was during your time in the military. What was the inspiration behind that research, and what were the key critical success factors that you identified at the time? I think it was back in 2019.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So the inspiration behind it was, before I joined the army, I worked for Siemens and Caterpillar, and sort of dabbled on the edges of their sort of ERP implementation that they were doing at the time. I was very junior at that point. So, um, and as I was doing my master's degree, we discussed critical success factors, but it was all around civilian ERP systems. So I thought, well, militaries have ERP systems. The British military had just gone through a massive upheaval to replace their very logistics focused ERP system. So I thought, well, are there parallels between the two, between civilian and military systems and the critical success factors? I thought that would be a really interesting thing to go and research. And at the time, I was quite lucky that I was working in a NATO headquarters with 30 NATO nations who, at one point or another, have all done the same thing, implemented an ERP system, because militaries still have to account for things and they have to move stuff around. So whether that's beans, bullets, or multi, £1,000 communication systems, it all needs tracking and monitoring. So I started with researching, well, very well documented information about civilian critical success factors. And then I interviewed as many of the NATO nations as I could at the time to analyze and sort of get their qualitative sort of opinions about their implementations through those militaries. So I had quite a good cross section of information to go off of. And what I found was that, yeah, they're actually very similar, and few of the critical success factors are actually to do with the system that was implemented. It's all to do with the leadership and governance around implementing ERP systems. So probably unsurprisingly, the top critical success factor that I found amongst these NATO nations was top management support, having a project champion and high level steering committee, and then having the right vendor relationship, and with them choosing the right tool. So those were the three of the top ones, but we had like the top nine, and yeah, I'm sure if I went through the entire list, they would be very, very familiar to a lot of the listeners as well. And it was a really interesting thing to understand that, yeah, going back to the earlier point, it's about the people. It's about convincing the need for the change, having that support, having those high level drivers throughout the project, not just at the beginning until things start to go wrong and then people distance themselves. It's all the way through.
And like we touched on, that was 7 years ago where you've identified
Mhm.
this. Have any of those factors changed meaningfully? We've had quite a bit of technological shift. We've seen AI applications come in. I'm not sure how they would affect the process leading up to finding a system, but would you say any success factors have changed, or are the fundamentals still the same?
I think the fundamentals are still the same. I think with AI and machine learning and advancing technology is that things can be speeded up a lot. You can do faster analysis. You can analyze the market and softwares across the board a lot quicker, which is great because that saves time and money. But it means that you can also make mistakes faster. You can go down the wrong path faster. So you need that adaptability to actually come back from those mistaken paths sometimes. And I think that's where the critical success factors become all the more important, because if you have top management support that understands that you need the adaptability to change decisions, and that can cost companies a huge amount of money to undo a bad decision, building it into the process, and actually discussing what would happen if, understanding that if we go down the wrong path, how quickly can we pull it back and then adapt and go down the right path.
Yeah. So even though it might have accelerated the speed of those figuring out those processes, it still requires a lot of critical thinking and adaptability in there, which brings you back to your CARES framework.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So we like to save the last few questions here, Jen. Just sharing sort of your insight and advice for the listeners. So looking back across your career, we've touched on it already. What is the single best piece of advice you got that you still rely on today, and that has helped you co-found Bright Lambs as well?
I think it's one I sort of realize you kind of do later on in life, but people always said, keep learning, and that's the one bit of advice that I would give to anybody. It's very easy to get stuck into the day job, and just going through the same problems and the same issues again and again. I've taken every learning opportunity that I can. I'm still learning a lot. I mean, especially today, AI. I spend a huge amount of time just learning and getting into the different tools and the different ways of working now. And I'm one of those people. I really enjoy learning and I enjoy new challenges. Um, and I think because now I'm a bit later in my career, I want to take that learning and do more teaching. So the people that we bring on into Bright Lambs, a lot of my focus is also on helping them to discover learning for themselves. The resources available to us today are mind-blowing. I remember growing up, my dad was really, really proud when he bought the Encyclopedia Britannica. If people remember that, it was like a stack of 30 books that had everything you could ever imagine. Anyway, but I think it was about 18 months later, the internet happened, and it sort of rapidly declined in its relevance. That was all you had to go off of, and a lot of people, was quite an investment. A lot of people couldn't afford that. So, libraries, and now a click of a button and you find an answer. It's amazing, but it can be like drinking from a fire hose. The absolutely overwhelming amount of knowledge that you can be exposed to now. And I would say, I was about to say absorbed, but people aren't absorbing it. And this is, I think, the problem, that there's so much out there. It is this fire hose effect that people need to slow down the learning and really, get into subjects very deeply to properly learn, and not just expose themselves to everything. And it comes back down to the shiny thing. Oh, I'll look over there and I'll look over there. And I've been guilty of it as well. I see the shiny thing and go, oh, I'll just go and research that. But yeah, it's a really interesting time to be alive, I think, and especially for people that like learning.
Yeah, excellent. And again, it comes back to adaptability. I think we've touched on that a few times today,
Yeah.
And just to round up our chat today here, Jen, if a company could take just one small step tomorrow to reduce the risk of any ERP implementation failure, what would you recommend that small step be?
Yeah. That's a really difficult one to answer because there is no one thing that I can recommend that I would think would do justice to every situation and every company. Um, so I think that certainly the first thing I would do is listen to their pain and anguish that they have at the time, really understand what is it that is causing them sleepless nights, causing them frustration, and and across the organisation, it can manifest in lots of different places. And so, before I could recommend something, the first thing is listen. And if you're in an organisation, take a step back and just listen to lots of people's opinions um, and and pain points before you leap in and try and fix the next thing. Because, as I said before, you have to understand the whole system before you can do that. Because you change one thing and it'll have a knock-on effect somewhere else. So you have to listen first, understand the problem before you can really solve it. So that would probably be my advice. Listen and take the time to research what the problems are. But it's not a quick fix. And I think that's also a little bit of a symptom of today, that everybody wants a quick fix, because that's the way we're fed data and we're fed information, through social media, through outlets. Everything's shock and clickbait and immediate and in your face. And people want, I think our pace as human beings has increased so much, like pace of thought, everything's got to be quick and fast. But unfortunately, that's probably what's leading to the most problems, is these quick fixes and these quick changes, and uh, people not taking the time to really understand the problem first.
Slow down, take it in, and understand what the issue is. Yeah. Excellent. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today, and sharing your experience. We set out to understand why implementation failure rates are so high and what companies can do to reduce that risk. And you've given a really practical view there of the fundamentals that matter most, looking at the CARES framework and your critical success factors as well. So Jen, thanks again for joining us. And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.